Hello. In this training, we'll be going over some basic Linux commands using the bash terminal. So this training assumes that you can already connect to the display. So you've given the display an IP address, either statically or dynamically, and can somehow connect to it through the terminal. For this video, we'll be using PuTTY to connect. But you could just as easily do everything with the terminal within the virtual machine or any Linux terminal for that matter. So you'll see here I have a DHCP server running, which is given the VA display I'll be using for this training, a IP address of 192.168.0.2. As always, we're connecting via SSH on port 22. So we can go ahead and hit enter here, and we have login as, and we're going to say root, and then the password is susroot, SUSEROOT, and this pound sign indicates that we're in the display. So we're going to start out with a few necessary Linux commands. So there's a lot of instruction online about Linux commands and the syntax of them, and how to do specific things, but there are some that you'll just need to know to get around the display. So let's start with the ls command. Ls, I always think of it as list. Okay, so this lists the files, and as you see when we hit ls here, we have no files in our current directory on this display. So let's move to a directory where we could have files. So to move directories, we use a command called cd, or change directory, and this forward slash here indicates the root directory of our display. So if we type cd space / and hit enter, now we're in the root directory, and if we type ls again, this will bring up a list of files in this directory. So you'll notice that, let's move to a different directory here, that way I can explain the color coding. So if we type cd space / opt, this directory is one you'll use most often. So the opt directory on the displays is the directory where we store all the user files. So by default, when you create a Qt application, your project will be loaded and stored in the opt directory. If you've installed Codesys, it's also installed in the opt directory. So if we type cd space / opt, we get to the user directory, and we can type ls again. And this lists out the files. So these ones in dark blue here, these are folders in the directories. So we have, you'll see a bunch of different folders here that we can also move into with cd. These green files, these are executable files. So in this case, these are run files for installing different things. The blue files, these are the light blue, are symbolic links. So these are like a link to another file. You can think of it like in Windows, they would be shortcuts. Okay, and then if it has no color, like this white or gray file here, that is not really, it's not executable, it's not really associated with anything. So in this case, this is a text file, because I've created it for another program, but we'll go over viewing and opening text files in a different video. So we can move around folders. So now that we've cd or changed directory into the opt folder, we could say if we wanted to go into like Hydraulics International here, we don't need to type cd /. The / indicates that you're going to start at the root directory. But if we're already in the opt directory, we can indicate the next one we want to move to by just cd space and then the directory name. So in this case, I'll start typing Hydraulics International, and if I hit tab at any point, Linux will try to autocomplete. So I just hit tab and you'll notice it auto-completed because HY, there's no other file or directory named that. So if you hit tab, it'll autocomplete for you, which saves you some time typing. So now we've moved into this directory and we can look and see, okay, we have an executable file in this directory, which happens to be a Qt application. And then it looks like a file for some J1939 signals. If we want to move back into the opt directory, so now that we're in here, if we want to move back, we can either type again cd / opt, or cd ... moves back one directory structure. So this should move back to now the opt directory. If you want to see what directory you're in, or what folder you're in, you can type pwd, and this will print out your current folder that you're in. So you'll see here we're in the opt directory. Okay, so let's say we wanted to do some other things. Some other common things you might want to do. So lists we've gone over, or ls. If you want to see, for instance, I mentioned this is a symbolic link or a link or a shortcut to something else. If you want to see what that is a shortcut to, you can type ls -la, and this is list, and then it gives it arguments, and you're telling it to list all. So here we can see the file usage rights or file access rights on it. You know, who created the file and things like that. And let's see. So over here, you'll see there's where we had our shortcut or symbolic link. It tells us where it points to now. So it says, okay, CrossControl's actually pointed to this folder mtcc. So if we were to cd into CrossControl and then did pwd, well, we would be in mtcc. So cd mtcc, you'll notice the files are exactly the same, and that's because CrossControl is essentially a symbolic link to mtcc. Okay, so some other common things we might want to do. Let's see. So we'll get back into the opt directory. Copying files. So if you have a file that you want to copy, that command to do that in the Linux terminal or bash terminal is cp for copy. So let's say I wanted to copy this persistent vars here. So I can say copy persistent vars. So the first argument or that you give it is the file you want to copy, and then you give it the name or location that you want to copy it in. So let's say I wanted to copy this file into the dm1 test directory. So you'll notice if I move in here, I have two files currently, dm1 test and dm1 test.json. So let's go and copy persistent vars into the DM1 test. So from here I can say either opt DM1 test, or I can just, because I'm already in the opt directory, I can just say DM1 test, and then I can give it a name. So I can call it persistent vars again, because there's no other file in that directory called persistent vars, or I could say, you know, persistent vars copy to make it more clear. So, and you'll notice when you succeed at something, so I hit copy and nothing printed out. So generally, if it is a success, if it works, nothing will print out. But if it doesn't work, for instance, I could spell persistent vars wrong, and then, you know, then it will give you an error. So can't stat persistent vars, no such file or directory. Okay, so if you do not get any errors, it most likely has worked. So let's now go into the DM1 directory and list out the contents. Oops. Okay, and now we see we have persistent vars copy in here. All right, so we just copied a file. What happens if we want to delete a file? We can use the rm command for remove. All right, so if I want to remove persistent vars, so here it's there now, I'm going to say rm persistent vars copy. And if I list out the files again, now it's gone. Let's move back into the opt directory. Let's say I want to delete an entire directory. So to delete a file, you use rm. But if you want to delete an entire folder or directory and all the files in it, you need to use rm -r for recursively delete everything in that folder. And then you can give it a folder to delete. In this case, I don't know that actually I can delete, for instance, DM1 test. So let's go ahead, I don't need that folder anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and remove DM1 test, and now that entire folder is gone. Okay, if you just want to move a file instead of copying it, you can do that with the mv or move command. So if I just wanted to move persistent vars into, for instance, the diag GUI folder, I can do it like that. And now when I list out the contents, persistent vars is gone, and it's in the diag GUI folder. So I'm going to move that back though. Persistent vars to back to opt. And go back to the opt directory, and now it's back. Let's see, two commands that are pretty useful for seeing what's going on in the display. So the first one is called PS, and this will list all of the processes currently running on the display. So on my display, I have our default startup launcher GUI, which is kind of the default settings or default settings GUI or settings application that comes up when you first start the display if you've never changed it to launch a custom application. This application will come up. So I can see that running here. PS is really helpful if, for instance, you want to stop or kill an application. So if something's running on your display like this default startup GUI and you want to run your own application. so you don't want it running anymore. Or for instance, if you created a Qt application but forgot to put in a close button or a kill button, for those of you that have gone through creating Qt applications, you may have probably have noticed that you can't run a Qt application over another Qt application. So you need to kill it first and then run it again. So if you forgot to put in a close button, then this is helpful to just be able to type PS. You see the list of running applications. So each application has a PID number associated with it. So in this case, I see the PID associated with Startup Launcher GUI is 1546. So I can use this kill command to kill any running application on here. So I can say kill 1546, and even though you guys can't see my display screen, the default settings GUI just removed from the screen, so my screen is now black, and you'll see that's no longer running. So that's a useful command to stop and kill applications. A similar command, so I'm going to actually go ahead and restart the default GUI application. And actually this brings us maybe to another good thing to know. So here I moved to this opt etc init.d folder, which this folder in the display contains all of the, well, not all, but a lot of the custom user startup applications. So you'll notice like our field bus access modules here, the data engine server, and then you have this startup GUI and startup GUI Qt5. These two are important, but explained a little bit more in other videos where we talk about starting your own custom application, or overriding the default settings application that is running on the display. So I won't go into them too much, but executable files, as we discussed earlier, are highlighted in this green color. And if you want to execute or start an executable, you can either give it, just write out the path that you want to start. So I could say opt etc init.d startup GUI, and if I hit enter, this would start this file or execute it. If you're in the file that you want to start, so in this case I am in the folder and I see these files, so I can type /startup GUI, and that will also execute it. Tells me usage, I need to type either start or stop. So I'm going to do that again and type start. And now I can see on my display that the default settings application has come back up. So this goes though for any executable file. So if I wanted to, for instance, install the link system with this run file, I could type link space va, and that would install it. I've already installed it, so I won't go through that again, but okay. Maybe that brings me to another important one. So sometimes when you copy files onto the display, you'll notice like if you copy a run file sometimes onto the display, it'll be this white color. So that means that it's not, the display has not yet associated it or doesn't know it's an executable file. So if you want to change a file to be executable or non-executable by the display, you can use this chmod command. And You can look this one up online. There's a lot of different arguments that go along with it to make a file, read only, read write, only readable or writable by certain users. But the most common one you'll use is either -x. I always think of it as -x to make it non-executable. So if I want to, for instance, change this links base VA to no longer be executable, I can say change mod -x or -x, and now you'll see it's white. So this is sometimes how it will appear though when you copy it onto the display for the first time. So to make it executable, if it's white, you use the opposite of minus or plus. So change mod +x, and I can give it the name again, and now I've made it executable. So if it's this white color and you're trying to install it, then it usually won't install. If it's, well, it won't install. If it's white and you try to install it with by executing it, if it's not an executable file, it will give you an error. So you need to first do change mod +x and then the file name to make it executable. You should know that it's executable by this green color, and then you can execute it with // if you're in that directory. Okay. Another useful command similar to PS, which lists the processes, is called top. And this, again, lists the processes running on the display, but gives you the CPU usage of that process. So right now I can see that this, the Fieldbus Access module is using a small amount of CPU. This startup launcher GUI is really not using anything, but if I, for instance, press some buttons on it, you'll see, it starts to use some CPU. So this is a basic way to start looking at some of your applications. If the display is running slowly, top will help you look and see if you're using too much CPU for a certain application. So maybe, you should design your application differently if it's using a lot of CPU. So to get, and you'll notice again, it does list the PIDs again, so we can, for instance, kill an application this way. To get out of top, you can type Control or press Control-C on the keyboard. So Control-C in the Linux, in the Bash terminal, pretty much will escape or kill any of the current processes you're running. So a useful command if you're stuck in something, Control-C will get you out of it. But it'll also kill the process. Okay, I think the last one we'll cover in this video is tar, and this is another important one that you'll use a lot. So let's say you wanted to transfer an entire directory from the display back to your virtual machine or back to Windows. A lot of times this is useful, after you're done with development, you want to start transferring these files to your displays in production. So once you have the list of like a folder with all the files of your application ready, then you want to transfer that. So tar is a compression that Linux allows. It's very similar to like zip. So to compress a folder, we can type tar, and then you want to type -cf. I always think of it as a create file, and you're going to give it what you want to compress. So in this case, let's say we wanted to compress the Hydraulics International folder. So we're going to give it that, and Actually, this might, I can't remember actually if it's the file name first or the file you want to compress. We'll try it this way. So first I give it, we'll try it this way. So first I'm giving it what I want to compress and then the name I want it to use. So this space second one, we'll say hydraulicsinternational.tar. Yep, other way around. So tar create file. So you first give it the name you want to use. So space, we'll just call this hydraulics intl.tar. And then you tell it what you want to compress. So in this case, I want to compress the entire folder, Hydraulics International. And there it goes. So now you'll notice I have this hydraulicsinternational.tar. And if we were to extract this file, for instance, or copy it back to our virtual machine, you could look in it just like you could a zip file, and you would see all of the files then in Hydraulics International folder also compressed in there. So the opposite of a compressed file, so if you copy a compressed file over to the display, for instance, and want to uncompress it, you would use tar, but instead of CF for create file, you're going to use XF. I always think of it as extract file, and then you give it the file name. So we could actually try this really quick. So we could move this Hydraulics International compressed folder, or tar compressed compressed folder into the diag GUI folder. So let's look now. Let's go to diag GUI. So you'll notice now Hydraulics International's gone. We go into our diag GUI folder and we've moved that file here. So now if we uncompress it, we would expect this Hydraulics International folder to be to appear in this folder with the files originally in that folder. So let's go ahead and try that. So tar xf. Alright, so we've now uncompressed our tar file and we see that folder, and if we go into Hydraulics International, we'll see the two files that were originally in it. So that provides a very convenient way to move a large number of files around. So we're going to go ahead and remove the folder since we don't really want it there. And then we'll just delete this file. Okay, I think that about covers some basic Linux commands, so hopefully that should be enough to get you started. In the display video trainings, I will have a video training that sort of goes over the structure of the display and in what files are in what folders, things like that. So go check that one out if you are unfamiliar with how the displays are laid out. But hopefully this training should give you enough to go on to begin to explore the displays and the files in there and know how to manipulate them at a basic level. And of course, there's a lot of training online about the Linux terminal, Linux scripting, things like that. So for further information, go check those out. Thanks.